Hello and welcome along to Penwith Radio. I'm Rob Jenkins and this is Lasting Memories, part of the All Our Stories project in association with the Heritage Lottery Fund.
Tin mining has and is in the blood of many a Cornishman. And in this edition of Lasting Memories, we take you back to 1979 when Ted Gundry talked to the late Willie Warren, former miner at Levant Mine. Willie talks of his memories of mining and the tragedy that hit the community on the 20th of October 1919. Our thanks to Ted Gundry for the permission to use some of his archive material, and to the great works of the Azook organisation, bringing communities together and strengthening community ties.
We are all good Cornishmen and mining men are we.
We are all good Cornishmen and mining men are we. We travelled around this world, my boys, to every country. We've travelled east, we've travelled west, we've travelled the globe around, to work in hard rock mining wherever it is found. Let's drink to every Cornishman wherever they may be. Let's drink to every mining man in every country. Let's drink the health and we drink the wealth as we pass the jug around. Let's drink to every Cornishman who works below the ground. Our ancestors were mining men to a very high degree. They mined the hills and valleys and they mined beneath the sea. They mined for the arsenic, the copper and the tin. And so now we'll drink a toast to all these mining men. Let's drink to every Cornishman wherever they may be. Let's drink to every mining man in every country. Let's drink the health and we drink the wealth as we pass the jug around. Let's drink to every Cornishman who works below the ground. Some of us have found some friends and some have none at all. And so when we draw our pay for a bottle we will call. We'll fill our glasses to the brim as the bottle is passed around. Here's a toast to Cornish mining men who work below the ground. Let's drink to every Cornishman wherever they may be. Let's drink to every mining man in every country. Let's drink the health and we drink the wealth as we pass the jug around. Let's drink to every Cornishman who works below the ground. We are all good Cornishmen and mining men are we. We've travelled around this world, my boys, to every country. We've travelled east, we've travelled west, we've travelled the globe around, to work in hard rock mining wherever it is found. Let's drink to every Cornishman wherever they may be. Let's drink to every mining man in every country. Let's drink the health and we drink the wealth as we pass the jug around. Let's drink to every cousin Jack who lies beneath the ground.
In 1834, the Royal Polytechnic Society at Falmouth offered a prize for the invention of a device to carry miners up and down shafts, eliminating the fatigue of ladder climbing, which reduced the output of a mine because of the effort and time taken to get to the workface. The award was gained by Michael Loam, and the first use of the man engine was at Trezevene mine, where it was installed in 1842. In 1855, it was decided that a man engine should be installed at Levant. This was at a time when the labour force numbered 800 men, boys and girls. In 1979, I went along to have a chat with the late Willie Warren of Pendeen to find out about Levant and the man engine that took miners down to a depth of 266 fathoms, almost 1,600 feet below surface. Well, he had left school at 14, and as he explained to me, preparations were made for him to go to work at Levant.
Had a few days off first. You know, you had to get the gear for to go in the mines then, you see. Your mother or whoever it was who we lived with, they commenced it off. You had to get 2 pair of trousers, sorry. See, linen trousers in them days, you see. And you, calico trousers. And that was the first start off. And then they used to have a skull cap, what they call a skull cap. Skull cap is what you used to wear under the tulle, because if you had the tulle and you never had the skull cap under, they would rub your head. See?
Now, your name Tull means a miner's safety helmet.
Well, it was a safety helmet. It was hard as the devil, he was. They'd stand a brow bang, see. These are tulle caps we had. And they had a rim around them, too, to safeguard your ears. If you had a stone dropping from any distance, you see, if you never had a skull cap on, well, anything might happen. You see a stone dropping from, we say, 50 feet and pitch on your head, well, it'd knock you out. But if you had a tulle up, you see, I'd be a lot of rosin in them their tulles. Hard as the devil, hard as the devil.
Were those actually bought already hardened, or did you have to harden them yourself?
No, damn me, bought hardened and all. All you had to do was make sure that it suited your head. You didn't want to have a big one. You wanted to have one, you see, different sizes then, just like your own their hat, see. You had the size to suit your head, you see. I believe they used to have them in Simpsons, them there hats. And as I say, you had to have 2 pair of trousers. You didn't wear a lot in the vent because the mine was very hot, you see. But halfway down, 130, we used to call that the turnstep in the man engine, you see. That you had to be very careful there because the step went from one side of the rod, you see, the rod, the center to go up and down with the steps on. That was the turnstep there, you see. You had to come off from one side of the shaft and turn and get on the other step, the other side of the rod. But you had to be careful. And then he said, you weren't doing a bad job. Well, I think you can ride now on your own, my son. So he said, I'll be below you, and you take notice of what I say. And he put a snoff down the turnstep level. Now he said, you come to that snoff and stop there. Snoff is a little bit nearly the end of the candle, see. One very more about a half inch. We used to call them snoffs, see. Of course, they had slime around them, see. And he said, now, you said, when you come there, he said, be careful, just come around the rod, dear, he said, and you see that step come up, and I'll tell you, he said, you step in when I tell you, see, of course, come there, went around to see, and then the step come up now, and he said, now, step on that, my son, see, and I stepped on that, and went on. Anyhow, he said, you wait down on the station for me, that's back, shaft, if you like. So he said, you wait until I come. If I'm early, I wait for you, boy. He said, if you're a bit early, you wait for me. We worked down the 278 level. That was the main level in the van, the 278 level. And if you was going down 278 level, you had to go 266 with the man engine, and then you walked down 3 ladders to the 278 level. That was the main level. That's where all the men used to come forth and back, see. It's a bit warm, but the warmest level in the van was the 326 and the 314. Them was the hottest levels in the van, see.
How hot was it down there?
Hot's the devil. Yes, you pour the water out of your boots, boy. See, you would sweat and all that water would go in your boots, and you would lift your boot up and you drain your boot. But you sweat like a devil down there. I was very hot down there. And bad for cramp, the 326 was. Because I tell you what it used to do. It used to be air pipes going in to see, and a lot of them, especially the youngsters, used to take out their jet of air, you see, and put them near their body, and that used to give them cramp. So I know a lot of people used to have terrible cramp, and I've seen them cramped up, in the stomach chiefly, because they used to feel hot. Then they used to turn that jet of air on, you see, and that used to give them cramp.
How about working out underneath the sea? Did you work out underneath the sea down at Levant?
A little less. So there was, people say miles out to sea, but it wasn't no thing as that. It was out to sea a bit, but wasn't no miles out. Then you hear some people say they hear the boulders turning over and all this, but I never heard known yet. So we worked in Snelly, worked in all them there levels up and down the draft Indian shaft. The first level was the 24, but that didn't go to sea. The 40 did. Most of Levant's water used to come back as the 40 level, and then there was a 60, and that's where, when the disaster was, where most all the men was brought back, 60 level. See?
The Levant mine had its richest workings far out beneath the bed of the Atlantic Ocean, extending more than a mile from shore and 350 fathoms below sea level. In 1888, Captain Oates of St. Just, for some years chairman of De Beers diamond mines in Kimberley, purchased a quarter part of Levant. He and his sons were destined to play an important part in the future of the mine. He introduced a number of improvements in the working conditions for the men. One such was the building of a dry, so that they would have somewhere to change after coming to surface, soaked in sweat from the hot conditions that were experienced in some of the loads at depth. When I went along to speak to Willie Warren, he told me about life in the mine when he went to work there in 1914.
When Colonel Oates took over, you see, he cut off the draft engine at the 254, and the consequence was then that all the bottom parts of the mine flooded. You see, and of course you can't work underwater unless you're a good diver, can you? Anyhow, well, that's what happened, you see. But the higher levels in the vent wasn't a success. It was very poor. There used to be two little tangy pumps down the vent that used to keep her dry at the bottom levels. One is at the bottom, of course, there's got to be one pump at the bottom of the mine, always is. And the other little pump was up the 326. And they were tansy pumps, and all they had was about an inch and a half pipe, see, a delivery. The Levant is very dry. See, that there pump, that bottom down to 350, that's the bottom of the mine. That's the bottom of the Levant. See, that's the bottom of the air wind shaft. And there was only, as I say, a little tansy pump down there, and that kept her dry. And she never worked, not during the weekend at all. When you went down Monday morning to see, you'd get perhaps about 6 inches of water on the flat sheets. That's on the station at the 350. But the 350, there wasn't many men down there working, only trammers. But the main loads of Levant then was the two loads in the 326. One load they used to call the polka load, and a branch off the polka load. Then there was a level up the 314, the Willie Bones load, that was called. And that's an intermediate drive up there. See, that was a good little load up 314. And the 338 load. Them was only levels that's working in the Levant at that time. That is Levant, is the bottom levels. Is from the 230 down to the 350. That's what I call the mine. But above that, nothing. See, them levels out there, the tin played out in them levels, see.
Now, what method of drilling did they use in those days?
Well, see, most all hand drilling, and there was two machines. There was one machine down to 338, almonds, bang, 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 it used to be, you know, very slow it was. I'd take a damn hour to drill a hole, but they were good big almonds machines. And then there was one down to 338, and the other machine was on the polka load, up to the 326.
And all the rest was literally sledgehammer and...
All the rest was the one sledgehammer. It was, we was called Macedonian ends, you know, with hammer and drill. And if you drilled 5 feet of a day, you done a damn good day's work. Of course, all depends. Some ends was a bit harder than others. But if you drilled away 5 feet of a day, you done a very good day's work. You all drilled with a hammer, what we call a Macedonian. That was a 3 pound and a half, 4 pound hammer. See, that wasn't called a hammer, that was called Macedonian, that's the whole name of them. and they'd have a spoke of a wheel. That was the best, you know. You would get a spoke of a Warner wheel. That was a handle for your hammer. That was a beauty. That would warp it, see. You would probably have a hammer that the handle them wouldn't warp. But if you had a handle that was a bit give-in, that would last longer. But that's what they used to call them, method handle.
Now, after the rock face had been blasted, how was that ore moved out?
Oh, moved out then. You had the shovel and you had to fill the wagons, see, and tram them back, see, the vent. All the stuff that was broke at the 326, that was trammed back, and that went down 338. And he's filled down there and trammed again, and went 350. Trammed down 350 and brought up then through the air wind shaft, and that was trammed back 278, see. And then there was dumped back here, and then he went surface. So you see how many times there was trammed and filled. You see, but today, you see, and none of that, see, you got one filling and one tramming and right to surface.
Underground tramming at the Levant mine was carried out with the aid of ponies, who returned the empties to the submarine shaft. They were sent underground via the skip shaft, and because of its narrow dimensions, the unfortunate animals had to be lowered into the mine tail first, with their legs tied close to their bodies and bolted into a box slung under the skip. At the end of their working life underground, they would be brought to surface, blindfolded, then taken to the far end of a shed, where they were brought gradually towards the light before being released to graze in nearby fields. Woody Warren remembered those ponies with affection, particularly one pony named Albert.
Jim T, now he had to look after all the ponies on the vent. There was one was called Tom, one was called Charlie, and the kicker, he was called Albert. And there was another little mare used to be there called Jess. And then there was another one. He never looked after the one down 302. See, it was 4 up to 278. And there was one down 302. But this here pony that we're now speaking of was called Albert. He was a kicker. And he broke Jim's nose, you see. And when he's coming in through the level now, you had a range for you see. But the rest of them, it didn't want no range for because they'd go in on their own. Jim would jump up in the wagon and they'd go in on their own. But this pony, he was a bit of a bugger. He was called Albert. He was a kicker. And he broke Jim's nose, this Albert did. But you see, they wouldn't put this Albert on until everybody was gone in, see, into their work. See, then Jim says, everybody in now, we put Albert in. And he was a bugger, that Albert was. And now, he broke Jim's nose. I know he's down the back shaft one day, and Cam Arthur come down. He was underground manager. He said, I think, he said, you know, you'd aggravate that bloody pony. He said, Jim. Well, he said, no more one thing to do. He said, jump in the wagon with me. He said, see what I do now. Cam Arthur said, I'll jump in with you one day, Jim. He said, and see what's happening. Well, jump in now, he said. And now Cam Arthur jumped in the wagon now with Jim, in the front wagon, see. The ponies used to pull in 3 wagons at a time. And then now he jumped in with Jim now. And, of course, after a bit of a while, this pony started, and away he went. See, he went into a level now, going like hell. And now, he kicked and he kicked. Arthur got halfway in. Arthur said, stop him, I want to get out. No, damn, he said, you aren't going to get out. You got to go all the way. He said, you saying I'm making this bugger kick? Because he would. He kicked like a devil. But Jim was in the wagon, see. But this time when he broke Jim's nose, he must have put 1 foot in the wagon, I think, to break his nose, because Jim had his nose away one side. But Jim was a good old boy, a very good old boy. He said, you jump out when I finish, when I get in the end of the journey. So anyhow, they got in here once now, and Cam Arthur got out. He said, well, Jim, I quite agree. He said, you aren't doing it. He said, is this damn pony? What are we going to do? And he said, keep him. He said, what are we going to do? He said, he's here. He said, and we got to keep him. And that was Albert.
Were these ponies ever brought up to the surface at all?
Well, occasionally they used to, but when they were done and finished underground, you know, they used to send them up. But they never went up unless they was finished, you know. but they was well looked after, you know. They had plenty to eat, plenty to drink, and they were shining.
But they never saw the light of day.
They didn't until they was bought up, you see. But was one or two of them bought up. We used to run in talk races. One was called Bannerman, and he was a real good pony. He was very fast, he was. And he won a lot of races, he did, Bannerman. Somebody down Newland had him. I don't know what he was called now, but he was a real good pony, he was Bannerman.
Did the blacksmith go down to show them and all this sort of thing?
Oh, damn it, yes, you had to be showed, see. If you didn't, then going on this rough ground, going in through the levels, you see, of course, they had to be showed. And Stevens was the man that used to come down that I can remember he used to show them. He had a business up here somewhere around the Kafiri area.
Did the blacksmith have to go down on the man engine?
Oh, damn he is, and he was a bit nervous, Stevens was. He always had a lantern. He never used to have a light in his hat like we used to, but he used to go down just like we were when we was boys. He always had a lantern, Stevens did. He's a bit nervous, Stevens was. He wasn't nervous of the ponies and of the showing or nothing like that, but he was a bit nervous of the man engine.
It must have been a bit difficult, though, because he had to take all his gear down with him, I suppose.
Oh, he sent that down with Skip, see? He never was taking on down, no, damn it, no. He sent what it wasn't over him with gear. He knew the size of every pony's down there, the hoofs to see, and he used to make them, and he used to send his gear down with Skip, see? And when he got down 278, of course, he took all his gear out, his hammers, nails, and shoes, and of course, he went on with his job. He had a proper thing down there. He used to eat the shoes whether it was wanted, but he didn't want very often to alter his shoes because he knew exactly what he wanted. He knew the size of the pony's hooves, and he knew the time had come and what that pony wanted to be showed. But generally, he used to, when he come down, he used to half of them to a time, see. There were Tom, he was the biggest pony, was there, and then there was Charlie, and then there was Halbert, that's the boy, and then there was the mare they had there. I think she's called Bess. And then they had one down 302. That was Tomer's pony, we used to call that one. That was called Lady. Pretty little pony she was.
How do you think these ponies saw their way in the dark, Will?
Well, they used to be. When they did follow the empty wagons back, see, when they go in now and fill the wagons, see, bring them back the full ones, they used to always come back, follow the wagon back. They wouldn't let the pony go unless all the wagons was gone. When all the wagons was gone, you see, they used to send the ponies used to go back, see? 3 of them, generally 3.
And I suppose a miner used to be going along with them.
No, they used to go on their own, yeah. But Albert, they had to be very careful because Albert, he wasn't put in the wagons to pull in unless all the men had gone into work, see? Jim T would say, everybody's gone in long now, we can put in Albert. But he wouldn't put in Albert until everybody's gone in.
It's a working man I am.
It's a working man I am, and I've been down underground, and I swear to God if I ever see the sun, or for any length of time, I can hold it in my mind. I never again will go down underground. At the age of 16 years, with my father close to tears, as he vowed never again to send his son to the dark recess of the mine, where you age before your time, and the granite dust lies heavy on your lungs. It's a working man I am, and I've been down underground, and I swear to God if I ever see the sun, or for any length of time, I can hold 65. I pray to God I'm still alive, as the sheep wheels overhead no longer whine, and they finally close the mine after years of ore and grind, and I never again will go down underground. It's a working man I am, and I've been down underground, and I swear to God if I ever see the sun, or for any length of time, I can hold it in my mind. I never again will go down underground, or for any length of time, I can hold it in my mind. I never again will go down underground.
During the First World War, the price of tin was kept artificially low to allow for imports of copper from America. Leaders in the industry and the unions requested continued government support, but none was forthcoming. Work at the mine continued under difficult economic conditions up until that fateful year of 1919, when the man engine collapsed, killing 31 men. This was a disaster on an unprecedented scale, which stunned the small mining community of St. Just and Pendeen and brought help from other mines throughout Cornwall.
Terrible, terrible, terrible. I was on a mower piece Monday about 3 o'clock when she broke, see, of course. It was quite a while before the news got through, see, of course, the village was stunned. See, well, he was bound to be, because you see, all the men went, see. And there was everybody knew one the other, see, and like if there's in a place where you didn't know your neighbour, but there's all men from our village, all men from the village, boys and men, and you see, it stunned the place by. They got them all up, terrible state, in a terrible state. Most all of them came back to 60 level, you see.
John James of St. Just was one of those men coming to surface that fateful afternoon, and remembered the terrifying moment when the beam engine collapsed, killing 31 men and injuring many others. At the time, John had reached the 150 fathom level, which quite probably saved his life, because the majority of those injured were on the top section of the man engine, which plummeted 276 feet, carrying 30 men with it to the 70 fathom level, smashing everything in its path.
Nicky goes, I know Nicky said the last word, he said, hold on, don't worry, I had an animal, see. Go ahead, and he said, don't try to get out. It's only a second, see. And that rod, it broke in two, see, up just above 60, see. If it didn't jam up there, they killed every man, didn't chap. Could have gone through. Hundreds of tons, said I, see. Didn't know whether you was going to live or die for a second or two, but we made him.
The man engine at Levant was installed in 1857 to a depth of 170 fathoms. At the time of the disaster, the Levant man engine was the only one remaining at work in Cornwall, and over the years had been extended to a depth of 266 fathoms, almost 1,600 feet. Having been at work for 62 years, it was regarded as being a bit of a museum piece, other mines in the county having modernised by this time. But this is the last thing that Nicky Barnes of St. Just was thinking about as he rode the engine at the end of his morning shift.
As it happened, I left work early that day. Ordinarily, I'd have rode up on the same step as my partner, who had his shoulder broken and never worked again. But I got halfway up to the surface. When the man engine started, I got on, and I got up just prior to the accident. I was up the dry. One of the chaps that was on the top step rushed up the dry, says the man engine was broken. And I ran down the tunnel again, and nothing I could do from there, so I went and walked down the cliff path and got in one of the adits, through to the main engine.
Now, what sort of damage was there in that shaft above?
Awful, awful. All come in, all cave right in. You couldn't get out up top at all. That had to be cleaned out before you could go down to fetch the men.
We were told to go up and get the injured out, dead and injured. Now, we were two of us, because there's only room for two. Now, we would get the dead out, tie him to a rope. My mate, who was stronger than me, he would lower him down, and I would go down the ladder and make sure they cleared. And one of them, when he swung around, he had a very big moustache, and his face was bashed in, but by the moustache I knew he was my own uncle.
It must have been a terrible shock.
It was. Even to this day I can't stand the sight of a lot of blood.
There were many acts of heroism as miners from the area and other parts of Cornwall rushed to the scene to see what they could do to help. Without thinking of the risks to themselves, there were many acts of heroism as they struggled to release their comrades, as Willie Warren recalls.
You see, the mines right through Cornwall, there wasn't many working, but they all had men there to help, see. But there's two men down here in our village that you never hear their names mentioned. One was called Harry Ellis, and another was called John White. They were two very brave men. Harry Ellis is the one who took the last man off the main engine, took Willie Nicholas off. He was the last man alive that was taken off the mine. And however in the world he lived, we never know, because he went, I don't know how far he went with that step. You see, he was on the step, and he managed to cling on to the step, or the handle of the main rod. You see, every step had a handle, see, you catch all the handle, like, and there was a step there, see. But however in the world he stopped on that step is a marvel, a mystery. But anyhow, how far he went, he didn't know, because Willie didn't know where he was when the engine broke, see. But he must have gone a considerable way. But anyhow, he was on there from 3 o'clock when she broke, around about 3 o'clock, right until the early hours of the morning he held it onto that step. He couldn't move, because the step isn't very big, you know. The step wasn't more than about 18 inches long and about a foot wide, see. But he was on that step all that time, see. Harry Ellis is the one who got up to him, you see, and he catch all of them. He said, "Boy, I got you." And he was the one who brought him back. A man called White, he was another one, daredevil, but he was down below. He was down farther than Harry, see. And John, he's there working like hell, he was. He had 2 or 3 men there with him, but he took the lead. See, John White took the lead. He used to live down near Leet, John White did. But Harry Ellis, oh, he was an angel of a man. And he had any amount of guts in him. I suppose Harry was sent away on a rope or a chain or something, so he got down where he, God only knows, he risked his life always. All right through that disaster, until they got everybody off, dead and alive, he was there. He never come up until he was all out.
At the time, rescuers didn't think of their own safety. The task was to get the dead and injured out as soon as possible. It was only after that the shock set in and the cruel statistics came to light.
Next door neighbour, me, one of them was killed, one with 11 children. John George down the bottom of the house, another one. And Johnny Grumple, the ship boss, he was in the middle of 2. It was 3 of them, one after another. All went work 7 together in the mornings, but never come home together.
A disaster fund was started, but took some time to administer. Mrs. Evelyn Oates' father-in-law was manager and shareholder at Levant.
One of the things that has never been mentioned, as far as I know, is the fact that Colonel Oates did at that time help as many of the wives and families of the victims entirely out of his own pocket and out of the kindness of his heart. Even had he not been involved in any way, he was the kind of man who would have helped anyone who needed help, and did many times on other occasions, not only to do with the Levant.
Whilst everything was done to alleviate the hardship, nothing could be done to replace the loved ones lost in the disaster. So, should this accident have happened in the first place?
Men that understand timber work and told me the timber was absolutely rotten that was supposed to hold that heavy man engine shaft. incapable of carrying out the job it was put there to do. And I'm fairly certain the management must have known about it, but put off the evil day of the expense or what have you. But just wasn't done, and it should have been done, in my opinion.
These are the names of the 31 miners who lost their lives in this place 90 years ago. We remember Henry Andrews, John T. Angwin, Thomas Branwell, Peter Branwell, Stephen John Brewer, George H. Eddy, John Ellis, William Henry Ellis, William John George, John E. Grenfell.
There were untold acts of heroism as miners from many areas of Cornwall struggled in the man-engine shaft to release their comrades with just the dim light of a candle to aid them. One false step, and they would have plunged 1,600 feet to their death. Besides the terrible shock to the families at losing a close relative or friend, an accident on this scale also brought hardship. Many families had not only lost a husband or son, but in most cases the breadwinner. Naturally, steps were taken to help alleviate those in distress.
Immediately after the disaster, a fund was started. Donations coming from all quarters, including Cornish miners abroad in South Africa, America and Australia. Payments were made to the dependents as soon as possible, although no record of the amounts exist. However, on the 25th of January 1921, the Charity Commissioners set out a scheme and appointed trustees to manage the fund, then totalling £28,000. This was invested, and the interest provided the working capital, which up to 1979 totalled £70,000 paid to the 34 dependents. At that time there was still £20,000 in the bank. On the 60th anniversary of the disaster in 1979, Mrs. Anita Murley was the only surviving dependent, and when her husband lost his life in 1919, she was left with 3 children to support. In addition, she had to assist her husband's mother, who didn't receive any assistance from the fund at all, just 7 6pence from the parish, or 37.5 pence if you want to convert that amount to decimal coinage. This was just one such situation, and in the past the people of St. Just have been critical of the way the trustees had handled the disaster fund in those early days, saying more should have been done at the time, because miners were poorly paid with little hope of providing for their families in such an event themselves, as Anita Murley told me.
If your husband got a good month, you might have 2 months that you wouldn't hardly get it sold. Sometime I've heard him say that he ought to take money over to the mine to pay for the candles and the diamondite they used. They didn't get enough to pay for it. I think the money could have been circulated among us better than what we had. Because when you got little growing children, as it was, and you always want boots and different things, and it was quite a bit of scheming to know how to pay for them. I know that, because I went through it and I know.
So should the original trustees have been a little more generous when the need was greatest? A point I put to Major Simon Belitho at Trengwayton in 1979. At the time, he was chairman of the fund.
I think that looking at the position from a today's point of view, this is probably so. The trustees at the time apparently felt it was their duty to relieve real need, and the need had to be shown, and then money was paid out, but there was, as far as I can make out, certainly no payment of anything in the way of luxuries or comforts.
The trustees felt it was important that the £28,000 invested should remain intact, with the interest providing a regular income for so long as it was needed. When the charity commissioners prepared the rules governing the fund, it was clearly expressed that if there was any balance, it should be conserved as a fund to meet distress arising from mine or quarry accidents in the county of Cornwall. So, in 1979, besides Anita Murley, the one remaining person of the original beneficiaries, there were 5 others who themselves or whose husbands have been injured or killed in mining accidents in the county who received benefit from the fund.
William James Harvey, Ben Hocking, William John Hocking, John Cavern, James Madden, Nicholas J. Matthews, Matthew E. Matthews, William John Murley,
There was no memorial or commemorative plaque in St Just to those who died at Levant, and several people I spoke to at the time felt that some form of recognition should be made. So before I left Major Belitho, I put the suggestion to him.
I think it sounds an excellent idea. I believe there is a plaque in the church at Trewellard, but I will certainly see that the matter is brought up at the next trustees' meeting.
Well, as it turned out, there was no memorial plaque at Trewellard Methodist Church, so work was put in hand, and 3 years after my conversation with Major Belitho, on the 20th of October, 1982, a service for the unveiling of the memorial plaque for those who died at Levant was held in the small chapel quite close to the Levant mine site. During the service, Mr. R. Trenoweth read out the names of those who died.
Henry Andrews, John T. Nguyen, Peter Branwell, Thomas Branwell.
In a simple but moving ceremony, the Lord Lieutenant of Cornwall, Lord Falmouth, not only paid tribute to those who lost their lives, but to those who went to assist the dying and injured without thought for their own safety.
Cornish miners, because they walk with danger, are brave men. Courage and kindliness are their mark in all times of disaster and stress. And the old guiding proverb that declares, kindness in another's trouble, courage in your own, is never truer than in these small towns and townships and villages in our county.
Sampson Osborne, Eddie F. Pascoe, Tom Rowe, Leonard Simmons, Nicholas H.
Naturally, for some of those attending the service, the occasion was tinged with sadness. But it also fulfilled a deep-felt need that some sort of memorial should be erected to those who lost their lives. Anita Murley was there, the sole surviving widow of the disaster.
I thought it was lovely. Really, I did. I was all of a shake because it brings it home to you, you know. But still, I'm very pleased to think it's taken place.
I didn't know my brother at all, but, you know, it's an honour to be out here, to see the plaque.
Yes, I'm delighted to think
delighted
that
to see that somebody's done, and I think it should have been done before.
I thought they should have had something either in St Just or else in Dundee, either one or the other, you know.
But of course here, I suppose, at Trewellard is the nearest to the...
Yes, this is the nearest. Of course, the miners used to go to work from right across the cliff, past here, down the bottom here, to go to work every day. My father used to walk to work every morning, so my mother tells me, yeah.
And this was down to the Levant?
Yes, down to the Levant, yes.
We dedicate this plaque that we may remember the men who lost their lives in the accident at Levant Mine on the 20th of October 1919. That we may remember the price they paid in winning tin and the sorrow of their families, and that we may teach our children's children to reverence that memory.
Matthew Newton, James H. Oates, Samson Osborne, Eddie Pascoe, Tom Rowe, Leonard Simmons, Nicholas H. Thomas, John Tonkin,
best carols I used to hear was down Levant in them days when I was a boy. Yeah. And there was an old man, he had a lovely voice, a baritone singer. He used to live down Metallic, called John Logan. And he used to be the choir master boy.
But he's the man that stacked them up, see.
But I shall never forget them days.
No.
And you could hear them going up by, coming up through Mannion Shaft, you know. Lovely carols.
Oh, yes.
The same carols we have here now, Christmas Day.
I know, yes.
The old one.
Well, you can't beat the old carols, can you?
I don't think you can.
Well, I know you can. I mean, you take the old Zenner carols, there's no prettier under the sun. And if they don't play them on the BBC and things like that, I don't know.
It's all pop stuff now. The Cornish choir in America to sing them. Yeah. Grass Valley Choir.
When they used to have carols singing at the Levant mine, did they used to sing these underground?
Underground, start off down 266. That's the bottom of the man engine shaft. And they'd sing all the way up. They used to start before the engine starts. See, the engine used to always start Abasto, sometimes a bit later than others. But that was the time, Abasto. But they'd always wait for John Lug to start up their carol.
Yes.
Because John Lug was a grand old man.
Well, he could start the right notes, see.
Lovely voice, lovely voice.
He had the right pitch, see.
Oh, lovely voice, lovely.
Sound and sound. You hear them, that sound coming up through the shaft, boy, is beautiful.
Boys joined in, see.
Everybody joined in.
Well, they could sing with join in.
Well, if it didn't, they'd say,
But they couldn't sing. Well, they had to shut up like a bus in the drone. They used to say, no good. Like somebody said, like a train gone off the track.
Now, besides carol singing, did you ever go around kissing girls underneath the mistletoe?
Don't want to say a lot about that.
What's about no devil? What was the thing? No devil. We always kissed on her whether it's mistletoe or no.
I think you're still kissing a bit, don't you?
I did deal but still.
We tell me a bit of mistletoe here and there, you know, right around here, but
we're going to have to kiss.
Hold on a bit longer sometimes.
Hang on, what do you call it? Hang on. We'd have them sometimes like that. Oh, Willie do, especially.
Oh, Willie don't, no. Love itself.
So what you're saying, Billy, really is you don't need any mistletoe.
We don't want no mistletoe to have a kiss, boy. Oh, no. We can kiss any time. We love it all.
You got to be careful, see.
My wife hadn't jealous.
How did that start in the first place, kissing under the mistletoe?
Funny thing about that, isn't it? Yeah. Under the mistletoe, that's the only thing you're supposed to have a kiss under Christmas, isn't it? Well, I don't know about that. Damn you, I have a kiss without a bit of mistletoe to hang out. Oh, I'm right there. Is. But tell the truth, innit? But don't, it's just a bit of fun. I love Christmas time.
Edwin T. Trathen, William Henry Tregear, James Vingo Trembath, William E. Waters, John Wean. We remember them in God's sight.
Tim James is unable to be with us this afternoon. He is not too well. It falls to me to lead the...
About 2 spoonfuls of demerara sugar, see. Then you put your rum in them, good rum. And then you boil your beer. It used to be always dark beer. And then you put that in a glass. And then you put a little small bit of lemon in it, see. Not very much. Not this old stuff you buy. You have the lemon itself, and cutting, you see, and putting on a lemon squeezer. But don't put very much of that in it, see, because that'll take away the strength of the rum. But that's Shenegrum. And some people used to like a little bit of nutmeg, just a little bit, on the top.
How big a glass do you used to serve it in?
Well, if you wanted a half pint of Shenegrum, you used to have a glass, well, a pint glass. A mug in them days, you see, one of these mugs, you don't see them now. Earthenware mugs you used to have. I believe we got 1 or 2 a year of them old mugs now. You used to have animal stone. Some of them had a sheep of wheat, some of them had a sheep of corn on them, you know. All had their own mark.
Well, what was the proportion of rum to beer?
Rum was cheaper then in them days than what it is now. You know, you didn't mind a little drop extra rum, especially for your pal, but you might say a double rum it is now. See, a doubler. And then you have your beer and
that would be about half a pint of beer.
Oh, well, you'd be a bit more with the froth on them, see, because the beer was boiling, you see, and you couldn't put that in a half-pint glass. No good to have beer cold, my son, not for Sneckrum. You got to have them boiling. Put a skittle on. Used to be the old skittles years ago. Of course, you haven't never seen any of them. It's what have they? No. Never seen a skittle they used to boil the beer in. Well, like a funnel, really, it was. See, you push that down right in the fire. But you mustn't allow no smoke to get in it. See, you must have it clear of the smoke from the fire. And that's Shenegrum by. And the last one I served it to was an old pal of mine, an old man. He used to like it, because he had it as a boy, see. And he would say, Willie, come on. You don't know what a Shenegrum is, boy. You know what it is. I said, I'll get a glass for you. Old Captain used to lick his lips, especially at Christmas time. John used to come in, he said, come on, Willie, I want a glass of Shenegrum. And I said, you shall have my duty. He said, going back now when I was a youngster. He said, I used to drink this before I left school, really. Jan did.
Who would have been able to afford that drink in those days, Willie?
Well, you know, what you call the toffs, like, see, farmers, well, if the miners done very well, they'd have a little drop. And tributers, they were the men who used to make the money in them days. Well, all depends on your pocket, boy, see. If you made a little bit extra, well, you'd have a Sneggrum, see.
And I suppose beer in those days as well. Tuppence a pint?
Pint. Well, half pint of beer, penny, a drop of rum, 4 pence. Then you charge now with different sugar, and you had for the nutmeg. How much now would that be now? Oh, I couldn't say. The rum is expensive now, beer has gone up. But in them days, the cheapest drink for a good drop of stuff.
So they were prepared to wait for their drinks while you prepared this...
You won't mind to wait for anything, it's good, boy. Shenegrum is good, they don't mind waiting a bit for Shenegrum.
takes you up and puts you down, and no one seems to care. So take me from this troubled road to where they'll never reach me. And put me in a place and time where all my friends will be. Take me home to Cornwall, from all that it knows. This one's for the boys, and I don't feel this time will never rest here. A pride and joy. This one's for the boys. Now I'm Cornish born and Cornish bred. I don't take that for granted. I keep it here inside my head, wherever I may be. But when the spirit of Trelawney calls, will not be prevented. Standing up for one and all, our Cornish friends and me. Take me home to Cornwall, from all that it knows. This one's for the boys, and I don't fear this land will never rest here. A pride and joy. This one's for the boys. Take me home to Cornwall, from all that it knows. This one's for the boys, and I don't feel this land will never rest here. A pride and joy. This one's for the boys. A pride and joy. This one's for the boys.
Let's drink the health and we drink the wealth as we pass the jug around. Let's drink to every Cornishman who works below the ground. We are all good Cornishmen and mighty men are we. We've travelled around this world, my boys, to every country. We've travelled east, we've travelled west, we've travelled the globe around, to work in hard rock mining wherever it is found. Let's drink to every Cornishman wherever they may be. Let's drink to every mighty man in every country. Let's drink the health and we drink the wealth as we pass the jug around. Let's drink to every cousin Jack who lies beneath.
That's all for this edition of Lasting Memories, part of the All Our Stories project in association with the Heritage Lottery Fund.